Breaking news! The country has gained a new mega ally. Tons of steel are heading straight to the armed forces of Ukraine right at this very moment. A real avalanche of weaponry is coming, and the Scandinavian countries have joined in as well. Putin's final defensive spurt, Russia has been left without tanks, and now the front is exposed. At this moment, tens of thousands of allied troops are advancing. The cauldron for Putin's army is heating up. All of this is covered in our special report from Cologne. This sensational news has become known almost for the first time. Romania surprised the world with an unexpected move, revealing the true secret cardinal. A course for total support of Ukraine. Right now, large-scale joint production is unfolding, and in addition, Bucharest will keep Putin's drones in its sights. Russia has been pressed, and the front is trembling at the approach of retribution. What is this arsenal loaded for total destruction? We're revealing all the cards in the segment. Don't miss it.
Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Romania has provided a significant number of defense aid packages, but officially neither the volume nor the detailed nomenclature of the supplied weaponry has been disclosed.
At the start of the full-scale war, the main priority was to receive ammunition and Soviet-made weaponry, or let's say, weaponry compatible with what the Russian Federation used, since it made up the bulk of Ukraine's arsenal, and there was no need for third-party assistance for its use. That's why we didn't lend a hand in this regard.
On a technological solution, the Russians will have less information about what weapons the Ukrainian military possesses and in what quantities. But now Romania's position has begun to change, and soon all the information may be made public.
Since the very beginning of the war, Romania has been regularly and consistently helping Ukraine with equipment and ammunition. Until now, a decision had been made not to disclose this. This is a discussion we will have between the government and the president to determine how we will act in the future, but I think such things should be made public.
Romania has likely supplied small arms and ammunition, artillery, and armored personnel carriers. There have also been reports in the Romanian media that any information related to the Russia-Ukraine war will be used and manipulated, supported by right-wing and far-right forces, as well as revanchists seeking to restore relations with the Russian Federation.
Romania has likely supplied small arms and ammunition, artillery, and armored personnel carriers. There have also been media reports about the supply of MiG-29 aircraft and T-72 tanks.
We are helping with Soviet-era weapons and ammunition from our stockpiles. We provided a Patriot system, and we are offering significant economic and humanitarian assistance. We are training F-16 pilots, and Romanian army officers are training Ukrainian soldiers. We help Ukraine every day.
Romania, if you remember, agreed to give us one Patriot system. That's not insignificant either, because, look, not many European countries have given us their Patriot systems. Very few have, but Romania did.
Romania also reportedly received a proposal from Ukraine to establish joint production of Neptune missiles, but declined. At the same time, according to the Romanian side, they have agreed with Ukraine on the joint construction of a drone manufacturing plant.
The experience of the Ukrainian front has shown that drones play a fantastic role in defense industry. A downed helicopter causes much greater losses than a downed drone. The idea of a partnership with Ukraine to produce these drones in Romania has emerged. But until the commercial and legal terms are established, I haven't told you anything.
As for the Neptunes, the project is currently on pause. And regarding the drones, it has been postponed until 2026 to accumulate, let's say, a sufficiently large investment sum.
Romanian President Dan previously stated that the country is not ready to send peacekeepers to Ukraine, but is ready to help in other ways as much as it can.
We, like some other countries, will not send a contingent to Ukraine after a possible peace or ceasefire. But we will support the logistics and supply of peacekeeping operations at our bases.
When Moscow aggressively closed off the vital sea routes for us, Romania truly lent a very strong and unwavering shoulder to Ukraine, and through its strategically important ports like Constanta, for example, a substantial amount of crucial Ukrainian exports successfully went under the protective NATO umbrella. Romania has proven itself to be a reliable ally, one that maybe doesn't talk as much as others but always comes through.
Similarly, in light of recent incidents and the incursion of Russian drones into their territory, the Romanian authorities are still only considering options for how to shoot them down.
This happens from time to time when drones fly over a small area of Romanian territory. In the past few days, pilots received approval to shoot down a drone, but after analyzing the situation, they decided there could be risks to the population, so they followed the drone until it left Romanian airspace. Well,
So how can we understand for what purpose the drone is flying into Romania specifically? I don't know. Nobody knows. Well, last time the drone was flying along the Romanian border for 50 minutes. Time, 50 minutes. It surveyed all the critical infrastructure, all the port infrastructure. It gathered data on the spot more than any intelligence agency operating in Romania could have collected, and there are plenty of those there as well. And that's it. Yes, and they guided the drone. It flew off peacefully, having surveyed all the developments in Romanian territory.
Ultimately, in Romania, they believe that if Ukrainians saw how much real military aid they had actually provided to Ukraine, the percentage of Ukrainians who view the country positively could increase even more.
The Russian Federation is on the verge of complete collapse, and Putin is quietly panicking in the Kremlin. The occupiers are doing everything they can to keep up appearances, but it's all in vain. There are almost no tanks left. A severe shortage of weapons is paralyzing the Russian army and driving them to real madness. Are the donkeys really coming back into play again? And on top of that, China might tighten the tap on arms supplies. The Russians are left without supplies. What other shocking failures of the Russian military-industrial complex have come to light? We'll find out in a moment.
Russian tanks are on the verge of extinction. It seems the Russian military-industrial complex can't cope, and soon there will be nothing left to fight with at all. And it appears the reason is the sanctions.
The role of sanctions here is mostly that they restrain this growth. They worsen both the price and the quality of the products that Russia manufactures. And in the long term, they weaken Russia in advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, which could have been developed.
The strong Russian economy that the Kremlin talks about is actually starting to show noticeable cracks.
Sooner or later, the overheating of the war economy may not necessarily lead to a complete collapse, but it could certainly cause a very sharp and significant decline. The general economic trends and prevailing conditions in the Russian Federation will also profoundly affect the military sector of the economy, impacting its overall stability and growth.
It would seem that, for the first time since 2022, salaries have started to fall at Russia's most important enterprises. And yes, we're talking about companies in the military-industrial complex.
Undoubtedly, lending to enterprises in the military-industrial complex has an impact, and unlike the form of this lending, the volume of lending to the non-military sector is different. This used to work in their favor, but now it's working against them. In fact, after reaching a peak, it's either plateauing or declining.
But how do the labor shortage and economic problems then affect the growth of Russia's military-industrial complex?
The ability of the Russian economy to supply the army, to provide weapons, equipment, and ammunition, these abilities are not unlimited either, especially when it comes to increasing production. The modern Russian economy can reach certain indicators.
Of course, this is not without its flaws, especially when they worsen the condition and quality of military equipment, or even completely halt its new production. But here, Soviet-era tanks come to the rescue.
The focus was placed on restoring Soviet equipment, on old Soviet equipment taken out of storage. Restoration would have helped again, as would overhauls to make them battle-ready. But those resources aren't limitless either.
And now the time has come when old equipment doesn't make the job easier. On the contrary, it makes it harder.
There are fewer and fewer units that can actually be repaired. We have to repair things that really aren't repairable anymore. We have to piece things together from several units. That takes significantly more effort, work, and so on.
So instead of producing new and modern equipment, Russia is increasingly using old and worn-out gear.
The production of new equipment is hindered by sanctions, as well as by the unpreparedness of the manufacturing base. That's why ramping up production of modern types of weapons is happening at a pace far from what Russia needs to make up for losses on the battlefield. That's why they prefer to fund things that will deliver results. Results that can be seen today, not tomorrow or the day after.
We shouldn't forget about Putin's loyal friends, China and Iran. They are actually helping him a great deal.
We have always truly stood together, both then and now, throughout all times.
However, any provision of weapons is more a way for Beijing to effectively keep Moscow on a very short leash.
From a technological standpoint, China is helping the Russians to catch up. At the very same time, the Chinese government is actively helping Moscow from the powerful position of a suzerain. They keep their hand on the tap. If Moscow acts properly and appropriately, they can open their gas tap and resume their supply.
But in the end, what do we have today? It is known that in 2024, the Russian Federation's military industry reached the limits of its capabilities. But what are Russia's prospects now?
This could be the so-called price to pay. That is, when the maximum indicators have been reached. Further growth is impossible, but it is possible to prevent a decline through administrative means.
The only question is how long the Kremlin can maintain this level. And what if it turns out that the unexpected blow comes not from the front, but from within?
Everything within the vast expanse of Russia is, in essence, our ally. The more that the high-ranking generals and the powerful icebreakers, who are integral components of the Russian economy and its formidable military-industrial complex, continue their illicit activities of stealing and embezzling resources, the less probable it becomes for them to maintain their current advantageous position and remain on the plateau of power and influence. As long as they keep stealing, they're doing just fine. With each passing year, their appetites grow.
But of course, sanctions are just a small part of what can help Ukraine defend itself against the Russian Federation. At the same time, ramping up Ukrainian military production is also an important factor.
You can't believe that sanctions alone will solve everything here. In the same way, we need to develop our own production and respond to strikes with strikes. This is the only way, and sanctions are merely an alternative to weapons, but not a substitute for them. That's why we need to focus on both.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
An explosion at the front, thousands of Indonesians are heading to Ukraine, while Russian mercenaries have already lost their footing. The Ukrainian armed forces are receiving reinforcements that force the enemy to scramble. These troops are determined. Panic among Putin's soldiers is growing by the minute, and a historic move by foreign allies could turn the game around. Here are the long-awaited developments. Don't miss the first details coming up next.
Even more aid and support. The Ukrainian armed forces may receive reinforcements to fight against the Russian occupiers. The president of Indonesia has stated that he is ready to send peacekeepers to Ukraine under the auspices of the United Nations once the appropriate decision is made by the UN.
We will continue to serve wherever peace needs defenders, not just with words, but with boots on the ground. If and when the UN Security Council and this General Assembly decide, Indonesia is ready to send 20,000 or even more of our sons and daughters to establish peace in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Sudan, in Libya, everywhere peace needs to be ensured.
This refers to the 20,000-strong contingent that Indonesia is ready to send. It is not sufficient to ensure monitoring of the situation along the entire length of the Russian-Ukrainian front. At present, the length of the Russian-Ukrainian front exceeds 1,200 kilometers. Therefore, there is no basis to speak about the effectiveness of a peacekeeping mission, specifically a contingent of up to 20,000 personnel. This would only be a monitoring mission.
Earlier, the president of the UN General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, stated that she does not rule out the possibility of deploying UN peacekeeping forces in Ukraine to support a ceasefire regime and post-war recovery, provided that the majority of member states agree to it.
To organize a peacekeeping mission, several stages must be completed. The first is the familiarization stage, when UN representatives travel to and familiarize themselves with the military, economic, political, and religious situation in the territory or country where the peacekeeping mission might be deployed. But most importantly, to deploy a peacekeeping mission, the consent of both parties to the conflict is required. That is, not only Ukraine, but also the Russian Federation. This is essentially a stumbling block. It is a dead end because for the peacekeepers' mandate, the budget must be approved. Again, the Russian Federation is one of the main sponsors of the United Nations. To say that they would be interested, and when it comes to funding a peacekeeping operation from the daily budget, the Russian Federation, this is not the case.
Let us recall that on September 4th in Paris, a coalition meeting took place with the participation of Ukrainian President Zelensky, where possible future security guarantees for Ukraine were discussed, aimed at ensuring a just and lasting peace. 26 countries agreed to form support forces, which are to be deployed in Ukraine immediately after a ceasefire is established. Within the framework of this plan, 2 separate ground groups were created.
Military personnel stationed on the territory of Ukraine will be considered as being deployed by the Russian Federation as part of that country's participation in combat operations on the side of Ukraine. Accordingly, the Russian Federation will be held responsible for any military actions at the moment of the elimination of these military personnel.
Meanwhile, the head of Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Lavrov, has already threatened that any European military contingents in Ukraine will become legitimate targets for Putin's army. This essentially means that their presence in Ukraine will be regarded by Russia as an occupation of the country by the West. He also added that the Russian Federation will not pay attention to the peacekeepers' flag.
The Russian Federation is categorically against the deployment of any foreign military contingent on the territory of Ukraine. This is essentially a fundamental red line, a Rubicon that they cannot cross. Accordingly, this discussion about the possibility of deploying peacekeepers and a contingent is purely a political component. These are statements not backed by concrete actions. Everything depends on the position of the Russian Federation.
For now, all of this is just a matter of prospects. Whether Western partners will actually send peacekeeping troops remains an open question.
This could finish off Russia once and for all. Scandinavia has switched to full support mode. Ukraine's defense industry is being elevated to the skies. Nothing like this has happened before. The Allies have exploded with enthusiasm. Weapon production is running at full capacity. Sweden is launching mega artillery. Meanwhile, Denmark and Norway are giving a tremendous boost to military science. This is a real breakthrough. New training grounds are being built for the armed forces of Ukraine. The Ukrainian army is about to become the most powerful in the world. More on this coming up.
The Scandinavian countries stand with Ukraine. Throughout 2025 and the following year, 2026, Norway will allocate nearly $8.5 billion to our country. Norwegians also plan to train Ukrainian soldiers and participate in the defense of Ukraine's airspace, allocating nearly $700 million for the purchase of Patriot air defense systems. Norway will also support Ukraine with another $640 million in the form of drones and drone technologies. In
each Scandinavian country, they have their own unique feature, but there are the most important things they share. This is faith in Ukraine. This is sincere help, which is obvious today. This is the use of all methods, forms, and formats to help Ukraine.
President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky noted that Norway has extensive experience in protecting its coastline and sea, thanks to which it can help Ukrainians. In Denmark, a new law has been adopted that will allow the Ukrainian government to bypass more than 20 laws and regulations to speed up the construction of national defense facilities. Among them is the Ukrainian company Firepoint, which manufactures Flamingo missiles.
Since the first day of the full-scale Russian invasion, they have been supporting Ukraine. Moreover, it's not just about financial funding and monetary support. These are also crucial initiatives that, above all else, currently and actively help our domestic defense industry to robustly develop, achieve significant new projects, strategically invest in our vital defense sector, and diligently implement cutting-edge innovations, among many other important things. Well, for a clear and compelling example, everyone is quite familiar with the innovative Danish formula where substantial financial resources and considerable money are specifically and directly invested into Ukraine's burgeoning defense industry. And in fact, this Danish formula was the first of its kind in this regard. And now, according to this Danish formula, let me remind you once again, that's what it's called today. Many countries have also started working together with Ukraine, building military factories, setting up enterprises, attracting Ukrainian scientists, engineers, and developers, and involving our citizens to work at these facilities.
Sweden will provide Ukraine with a new 20th aid package worth $836 million. Among the weapons to be delivered are 18 new Archer systems as part of ongoing long-term programs. $36 billion annually in 2026 and 2027. And $900 million in civilian funding from 2026 to 2028.
Everything that concerns, for example, artillery, is truly something that influences the outcome of battles. Something that helps in combat, something that allows us to destroy not only enemy personnel but also equipment, and the quality of Scandinavian weapons in such systems is outstanding.
Cooperation with Finland is important for Ukraine.
Take, for example, the president of Finland, Alexander Stubb. He is basically, probably our representative in President Trump's administration. He has good relations, indeed friendly relations with the host of the White House. And I think that much of the initiative that is helping to implement the very complex dynamics between Ukraine and the United States is precisely thanks to the president of Finland.
The Scandinavian countries are strong economies, and with each year of the war in Ukraine, they are increasingly expanding their defense budgets, particularly to help our country. In this way, these countries are not only helping Ukraine, but also setting an example for defense and cooperation with our state.
Shock. Ukraine is exploding in exports. Zelensky has given the green light. Our combat monsters are already heading out into the world. Technologies forged in battle are shaking up the market. Even top engineers are amazed by what's happening right now. This is a true breakthrough. Hear the first details about it right now.
Ukraine is officially launching controlled exports of its own weapons. But this is not being done for the sake of trade. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, this is a tool that will allow us to finance the growth of our own defense industry and strengthen the front.
Thanks to such controlled exports, we will increase the production of drones for the front. We will have the funds, certain types of weapons, and this is modern weaponry. We can produce it in much larger quantities, and we can finance it ourselves. And certain types of weapons we already have in much greater quantities. We really need them today in Ukraine.
Why is this happening? Right now, after 3.5 years of intense war, the Ukrainian military-industrial ecosystem has undergone a rigorous practical test. Models tested in real combat have proven their effectiveness.
The main focus is on unmanned systems, but not only that, we can see how production can now stabilize, for example, Ukrainian self-propelled artillery and a number of interesting models and units. And this actually shows that Ukrainian products are currently extremely interesting on the global arms market.
Today, many enterprises are operating under conditions of chronic underfunding. They could produce much more, but they lack sufficient funds and orders. The underutilization of the Ukrainian defense industry is estimated at about $15 billion. There is a shortfall of about $6 billion just for drone production. Managed exports will allow for attracting funds to modernize and expand production lines. At the same time, priority for the front will be maintained.
If a unit of weapon costs $10 for Ukraine and is sold only on the Ukrainian market, the manufacturer is limited to just the Ukrainian market. But when it is sold abroad for, say, $15 to $20, taking into account profit and all additional expenses, that same unit of weapon could cost Ukraine $9 or even $8.
The economic effect is obvious. Manufacturers receive income while the Ukrainian army gets modern weapons at a price lower than the cost price. Moreover, if Ukrainian manufacturers are given access to foreign markets, the total output of drones and other weapons could increase from the current $1.5 to $4 billion. These are not just numbers. This is a real chance to keep factories running, create thousands of jobs, and turn production into one of the drivers of the economy. But that's only one side of the coin. The strategic effect is no less important. The purchasing countries, by building their logistics and service infrastructure around Ukrainian models, will in the future become dependent on spare parts, maintenance and training, creating a long-term market and a political connection to Ukraine. Moreover, the expertise gained from battle-tested systems makes Ukrainian technologies recognizable on the world stage and attracts investment in research and development. But any initiatives carry risks. And that is precisely why Ukraine has chosen a model guided by experts, one that combines economic benefit with the guarantee that the front will remain fully supplied.
Still, we are making choices in certain specific areas where we can sell even what we currently have available. Well, for example, these are naval drones, which are currently attracting a lot of serious interest worldwide. And not only that, of course, but also in a number of other areas. But there is also the aspect that we will simply be earning money. Accordingly, we will receive additional funding from this, funding for our own defense forces.
In this way, controlled arms exports become both an economic and a strategic tool. Powerful Ukrainian manufacturers not only supply the front with the necessary resources, but also open up new opportunities for cooperation with allies. This is not just business. It is a way to turn our own developments and experience into an international resource that supports the country's defense and strengthens Ukraine's strategic influence on the world stage.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Stay tuned for more hot news from the front in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit like. See you soon.